Failed World, pages 51 through 75. Oknal looked down at her people and took in the feeling she loved. She fed off of their admiration, and it gave her ego all she wanted in those moments. Oknal craved these times. She made the captured man step forward by poking his back with a spear she took right out of the hands of a guard. Oknal enjoyed the taunting, knowing her son's friend feared falling to his death in the same way his friends did not long before. Oknal thought about all the times she lost people closest to her. She had nothing but memories of betrayal. These things twisted her mind so much she no longer cared for her son, much less any of his old friends. Her heart was turned to the blackest of stone, which made her cold as ice. She couldn't wait any longer, with that kind of resentful rage flowing through her. Oknal dropped the spear, tossing it down hard enough to make it clank loudly. This made the man about to be sacrificed scared so much he thought he almost had a heart attack when he flinched. Oknal was angry that after all those years, more of the same kind of people came out of the woodwork to smite her. Oknal thought she got rid of all these old drinking buddies who belonged to her son's old bunch. When she made the one who violated her cringe, she felt a slight sensation of joy, but it quickly turned back into wrath intensified. After throwing the spear to the ground, Oknal pushed the man to the edge of the wall. She knew it was taking all he had just to keep his balance. The crowd below cheered on, calling for his execution to complete the sacrifice. Oknal then pointed her finger sternly at the man, signaling to look away from her and back to the crowd. She then extended her other open hand. Oknal held out her open hand until the guard closest to her realized what she wanted. A dangerously short sword, was placed into Oknal's hand. She smiled wickedly, then made one clean swipe at the offender's neck. His head fell down to the crowd that cheered below, while the body fell back at Oknal's feet, just as she had hoped. People down below fought for the fallen head of the man. This tradition was created by Paradisians and established since the earliest days of the failed world. Whoever could retrieve the head of a sacrifice held high from the crowd and reach the center hilltop while still standing would be celebrated as a ceremonial victor and given gifts by all the Paradisians. The hill was a special center point of the courtyard designed for sacrifices. When Oknal would see the head held up by the victor, she would then nod to signify the next phase of the sacrificial ceremony, which was the final act of the celebration. Her guards held torches designed to hold pieces of meat to roast. With the sharp, short sword, Oknal cut pieces off from the headless sacrifice at her feet to roast just enough meat for the particular flavor, while making sure to still keep blood inside the flesh of each piece. The lightly roasted pieces of the sacrifice were then tossed down to the crowd, who fought for the meat, believing they would be the next to be blessed. Blood speckled the faces of those closest to the wall of the chamber hall above. When the guards were done with this final duty, Oknal brought in new guards that were next in line from the other shift. She gave them the order, which surprised them, but they knew it had to be carried out, even if they didn't understand why at the time. They knew her signal meant they needed to kill the guards in front of them who were helping her carry out the ritual sacrifice. Oknal put the blade of the sword close to her own throat and made the motion of death, angrily showing her teeth grinding together. The guards behind the ceremony guards, who were the ones that failed to protect Ochnal during the night, were both stabbed in their backs and decapitated from behind. Their heads fell to the crowd. Those heads were also fought for by those down below celebrating. There was a barbecue pit for roasting mass sacrifices, usually babies. This altar was just outside of Ochnal's bedroom doors. She had the headless guards roasted together. Thereafter, those butchered bodies were thrown in the roasting pit with their torches. Down below, Etha was about to give birth in the middle of the celebrating crowd. Around her scurried ritual participants that wrestled for the heads of the guards. Blood covered several of those people below, who were directly under the flesh goddess when she ordered the execution. In the middle of a crazy celebration, Earth's child was born. Etha was spotted by the guards, who alerted Ochnal that there were people trying to get their attention. These people waving their arms were Etha's family. Ochnal saw them. "Bring them up here," Ochnal ordered. Her guards made sure to stay with their flesh goddess, so they passed the word of her command to the next ones down the line. Guards lined the chamber hall down the steps to the lower floor. The ones in service on the floor of the temple went out to retrieve Etha, her newborn baby, and her family that stood around her. Etha looked at her baby and felt nothing for this child. She was ready to give it away for sacrifice, as her family encouraged her to do. They were happy to go with the guards to meet the flesh goddess they'd heard so much about. The biggest guard of them all carried Etha. Etha looked at her family with a look of excitement. They smiled back at her, confirming the sentiment. Up the steps, this enormous man led the way, carrying Etha, who held her newborn infant. No one even cared to ask what it was. No, not one person in her family cared. Everyone just walked alongside each other, up the steps to the top level of the temple, where the famous hall was located above the wall where people gathered for the sacrificial ceremonies. One could only dream of actually going up there by invite. Earth and Etha both had one common thought in mind. Their child was already dead. Earth had to accept the terrible truth of his circumstances, that he could do nothing. There was no stopping such a thing. For Etha, she looked at her newborn baby just the same as she would look upon an animal given to slaughter to feed her family. This child was given to Ochnal as soon as they reached the chamber hall. The flesh goddess looked at the baby, expecting to see a boy, but it was a girl. She was surprised and felt different. If it were a boy, she would have instantly thrown it in the roasting pit with the guards, but something inside her heart shifted. She thought that she could raise this child as her own, to have a suitable replacement. Ochnal knew that if she didn't begin raising a child soon, she would be too old to do so. "Do you give your child to me?" Ochnal asked Etha, not revealing her intentions. "Yes, for the sacrifice," Etha quickly responded. Etha's mother then spoke up to tell Ochnal why this was so, saying to her, "We come from very far, in the wilderness. We live in between the tribes of other types of people who are not like us. The word reached even us about your declaration. What is this that you've heard? To join me at my table?" Ochnal asked, knowing. "Yes, my goddess, the child is yours, so that we may serve you and live as we heard," Etha professed. Ochnal then tested their dedication by going close to the burning fire pit, where plenty of flesh was already being roasted. She held the baby in a way that appeared to Etha and her family as if it were already being touched by the flames, but it was not so. The baby girl was in front of the fire, only feeling the intense heat, becoming tired from the extreme intensity. Ochnal examined the faces of Etha's family. After looking sharply into Etha's eyes, as if reading her soul like an article transcribed on a wall for all to see in perfect clarity. When their dedication to sacrifice was proven to be real, Aknal pulled back, drawing near to her heart this newborn baby girl. Since you gave this child to me, I will keep this child. I only ask you to do one more thing to prove your willingness to serve me by fulfilling one important part of the ritual. Aknal ominously stated, causing Etha and her family to wonder what this meant. Aknal left them in the chamber hall to go get something out of her room for the ritual. She came back with a display case carrying a phallus collection, tipped with skulls of premature stillbirths she had herself over the years. Aknal always wondered what she'd do with that collection, wondering if the idea would ever come to her. That day, she finally found her answer. Aknal told Etha and her family that these were the children she was supposed to have, but was cursed since the day of her son's birthday. Etha and her family were made to perform the phallus ritual in front of Aknal. The flesh goddess held her newly adopted child as she ordered the people to do as she commanded, starting with, "Put the phallus in your mouth to the back of your throat." Etha's mother vomited, causing the rest of her family to gag and spit. From there, Aknal demanded that Etha and her family use their own saliva to lubricate whichever orifice they preferred to penetrate themselves with the fetus skull phalluses. Etha's mother was made to use her wretched stomach acid as punishment. Aknal was angrily annoyed, thinking this was a sign of withdrawal from the ritual. She despised weakness. After the phallus ritual was over, Aknal kept her promise. She was pleased to force Etha and her family into obedience with the promise of royal status. Having a seat at Aknal's table meant that you were closest to the flesh goddess. Having such power showed everyone that your riches were unlimited. There were no privileges kept from a person with such status. The declaration of vainglory was true. Nal and Earth had a new understanding between them and nature. They talked with the plants as much as they did amongst themselves. With this communication as friends, the plants showed themselves friendly, helping Earth and Nal navigate through the tough terrain. The South Shore waited for them. All they had to do was make it through the places of beasts that acted almost human if it weren't for their animalistic tendencies. The father and son would cross paths with one specific type of beast that interacted with people like Etha's family. They lived alongside each other between territories, so it was necessary to communicate with each other since the beginning. These beasts were close to humans in anatomy, walking on two legs, having two arms, and a head that shared all the same features as far as placement. The cheekbones and jawbones stuck out much further, and their eyes were half the size compared to a person. Besides this, none had breasts like a human. Their chests were thin and bony, in contrast to their round abdomens. Their arms were very long, but not that big around. Their legs were big and curved, mostly in the thighs. They didn't have tails, but had hair like a horse, going down the middle of their heads, down their neck, all the way down to the top of their back, ending at the middle of their shoulders on most. Their whole bodies were covered in thick short fur. Most were different shades of brown, but some were either black, white, or yellow. None were spotted. All were of one solid color, very definitive. These beasts spoke their own language, but communicated with humans by basic hand signs. Etha taught these hand signs to Earth, and so Earth showed his father along the way to the South Sea. It was explained to be inevitable that they would cross paths with these beasts, and it was impossible to know how it would go. The confrontation could go any number of ways, and they didn't want to guess how it would turn out. This was one of those things they'd have to face head on, hoping to live through it without in vain. When we come across the small creatures that burn, that is when we will know we are near the edge of the wilderness to the south, close to the beach and the seaside cities, Earth told his father. Now was enjoying the time with his son. We made sure to make the best of these moments. He made sure to make the best of these moments, knowing they had a hard time ahead of them between the inevitable confrontations with beast colonies, other people like Eth's family, people all over the world who hunted now for bounty, and the different possible scenarios that waited for them in their quest to find Now's other children. Earth wondered what his siblings would be like, just the same as Now wondered what his children would be like. They talked about how Earth's whole life was spent, each day wondering what they were like, father and son. The entire walk through the plant life went quickly like a breeze as they bonded. Now only knew things about the city. All those years spent wandering through the wilderness, he knew nothing of the surrounding areas, staying lost in the thickness of the trees that unknowingly protected him from the surrounding dangers. Countless times Now was saved by confrontations that otherwise would have happened if it weren't for the plants and trees working together to keep beasts and people away from him. Now never would know just how lucky he really was during those times. He had an idea once he learned how the plants and trees worked together to help him and his son out of the impossible terrain. Those trees were as dark and thick as anything imaginable without their constant cooperation, opening themselves up overhead to light and guide the way. The small creatures that burn were like nothing on earth. These particular animals glowed with bright red-hot fire that was not like a typical fire. Their bodies perforated at will, releasing toxins that were ignited by natural gases released by their digestive systems. These openings in their skin were covered with cracks all over their body, like lines that folded to go smooth or spread. Their shape was like newly formed bread dough before it turns into a loaf, but not smooth, looking rough with lines and cracks. Their skin was very dry and hard naturally by their frequent burning. The only time they weren't burning was when they ate. These little burning creatures did often eat about every few hours to keep their protection going. If it weren't for the constant burning, every carnivore on land would love to eat them as a snack. Their meat was addictive for every beast due to their distinct toxins that were a mild poison like a drug, only flammable. Now asked if they too could eat these burning creatures, Earth explained that hypothetically they could, but they would become addicted like the animals who have tasted their flesh. This would be very dangerous given the nature of these animals. Earth told his father in response, animals often die from their addiction. Now understood, since he was familiar with the people of his city and their frequent deaths by overconsumption, mostly dying from magic plants eaten with excessive wine drinking. Now knew many people who died the same way as the addicted animals. Knowing where curiosity could lead a man is a virtue. This is the wisdom that separates man from beast. Earth grew up without a father to teach him certain things, but he knew. You have a natural sense of discernment, Now told his son. I don't know or understand a lot of things outside where I live. To survive, I've learned what not to do. This has helped me more than knowing what to do, Earth replied. I'm amazed by the perfect balance within you of wisdom and simplicity, Now said. I never wanted to be like the other men I knew. They chased competition, learning from each other's achievements only to spend their lives trying to outdo each other. I've seen it with my wife's family and the men they were associated with, Earth explained. Besides wanting to go to the great city where I come from, what do you mean? Now asked his son. There are other cities. People built all sorts of things. The great city is not alone in the world with their greed and power. The city you escaped from is the biggest, most powerful. That's all that sets it apart, Earth answered his father profoundly. Now an earth came out of the heavy parts of the wilderness where there began to be less plant life and more sand. The openness of the plain seemed to go on forever until they found a road. The drop in the land led to the road, and this is all Earth knew that he could trust, so they wouldn't get lost. Out of the forest, the hills were like two angled planes pressed up against each other, creating a crevice like a dry creek or river undercurrent pattern. This is what led them to the road that goes to the seaside. Earth only knew of it from his wife and the stories she had heard, which fascinated him. Have you ever seen anything like it? Now asked Earth without clarifying. This place or the burning creatures? Earth honestly wondered. Oh, I didn't see them. Well, them too. Have you ever seen them like this? You've never been this far, have you? Now was surprised to see so many of the burning creatures, and had to add this to the question, which took his breath away. I guess I did see this place and these animals when I was very young, but I don't remember. I don't like to remember. Earth's demeanor changed as he looked sad. I'm sorry to bring up bad memories. Now also became sad to think of this thing. Tell me what you remember of my mother. I haven't seen her in so long. I have nothing but bad memories from when I was not quite a man. Earth further surprised his father with this question that helped now learn a lot about his son and what his life was like. I understand this, my son. My memories of my mother are not good. My father was treated worse than a dog. Still, it is no excuse for my behavior. I just wish I knew of you sooner. Now became increasingly sad as he thought of his son's childhood. I was angry with you when I was young. Mother taught me to feel this way. I'm still angry about what you did when you were drinking every night, laying down with women. I forgive you knowing how difficult your life has been, thanks to Grandpa, Earth said. I knew I deserved death, or worse than death, the moment I learned of all the women who came forth to my mother, your grandmother, Nell admitted. How so? You already lived a life of suffering up to that point, Earth said, showing kindness to his father and understanding. I was mostly naive, but there was some part of me that still knew what I was doing. I knew I shouldn't have been so careless, laying down drunk with those women, but now I cannot regret my children. I became thankful and fearful all at once to think of what has become of my children, now confessed to Earth. Did you think you might become a father? Earth asked. I trusted what they told me. Every one of them said they couldn't become pregnant. This was how it became easy for me to go to bed with them, Nell admitted. Say no more, I understand. Earth told his father in agreement as they came to a stop. The burning creatures were right in front of them at their feet. On defense, they were on fire altogether, bunched up. Now on Earth disturbed their mealtime. This naturally angered the beasts. That is when the other creatures came from behind in an attempt to attack. Part of one beast family who knew Eth's family came to the sound of Earth and now talking. As they walked along the path leading out to the forest, these peculiar beasts that Earth told his father about appeared. They wondered what a confrontation would be like. These few who came to follow Earth were unstable among their own kind. They were known for their aggressive behavior towards anyone they felt was a threat. Look out! Earth told his father as he pulled him down by his shoulders. Now on Earth dropped to a squat, then came up with some kind of idea on the spot, trying to get out before being killed. Earth remembered the hand signal for friend, which also meant neighbor, as in someone who lived alongside them. The beasts stopped charging and gave a hard look at Earth, trying to see if they could recognize him. They did not, but knew what else Earth was trying to communicate. He desperately tried to tell the beasts about his wife's family and their closeness with each other, The beasts only understood that their immediate family must know them. This was enough to save their lives. Earth saw the relief in his father's eyes and gave a sigh of relief as well. One of the beasts pointed at the flaming creatures that were bunched up in a defensive formation. Earth nodded, as if agreeing with what the pointing beast was trying to convey. This beast then violently clubbed the burning creatures. He was hyper and eager to kill these strange little animals. The addiction to the coveted meat of the flaming creatures was what these particular beasts lived for. This habit of hunting consumed their lives. When the flames were pounded out, the other hungry beasts came to pick up the pieces. They burned and singed their fingers, but it didn't stop them from eating the flesh of these addictive creatures. Tongues and roofs of mouths were burned, but the craving was satisfied. When the familial group of beasts were finishing their feast, meat-eating wasps came and agitated them, causing them to fight for the scraps. The wasps won, biting the high beasts all over their hands and faces. The inebriated beasts ran to the river that flowed into the sea and hid from the wasps until it was safe to come out again. Earth and Now weren't bothered since they had no desire to taste this cursed flesh. The meat-eaters, as the wasps were called, were the size of a thumb. Their jaws caused a very painful bite and made the irritated skin swell up with 2 bumps from the serrated fangs. Only one beast with the club was not bitten of all the familial beasts that were there. That lucky one was able to swat them away, so this hyper beast stayed to communicate with Earth. As they were trying to better understand each other, Now saw people coming up from behind them in the same direction they came from, which was also where these beasts came from. It turned out the beasts weren't the only ones doing some following. There were people living on the edge of the forest where the sand began to appear. These were the type of people who lived between the beasts and their families since the beginning of creation. They were like many other tribes who did no good, but only sought to fend for themselves and their own devilish desires. "We need to move, we need to go," Now got the attention of his son Earth, while he was still trying to understand the hand signs of the hyper beast. This beast with the club stopped trying to make hand signals to look and see what Now was talking about behind them. This beast became distressed and began alerting the others who stayed close to the water, hoping they'd stay there to keep safe. A large spear was thrown from one of the people who came close to them. The beast with the club was pierced through his large abdomen and died, propped up by the spear that stuck into his gut. The others by the water were both frightened and angered. "They'll get over it," one man spoke to Earth, and Now as they were stuck there. "Why did you kill him?" Earth asked the man who came close. "We thought he was going to kill you. He was waving his club." "You are Earth? Earth's husband?" the man asked, giving an unsettling grin. Earth didn't know what to answer. Now also felt the bad vibes that came with the man's questioning. On their backs Now carried their tools and weapons, while Earth carried the tents. As Now saw his son struggling to answer the man, knowing he had to say something, Now thought of a way to take out his weapons without being caught and killed. Since Earth wasn't saying anything, Now took the liberty to speak, thinking this would be their only chance to survive this perilous confrontation. "No, this is my son. We have something that might interest you to prove to you who we are," Now cleverly answered, knowing technically he didn't lie since Etha left Earth. "What is it?" the man who threw the spear asked as curiosity won him over. Along with this dangerous man came several others, all wanting to take a look into the bag that Now took off his shoulders. Now gave a short nod as he made eye contact with his son, then threw him an axe and a sword. Earth caught them and began swinging so that Now was able to grab his own. Father and son held a sword in one hand and an axe in the other. Earth was able to slay two of these wicked people before the others knew what was happening. After this, Now had to throw his axe before a spear was thrown at his son. Now hit a man before the spear could be thrown, splitting his face open with the spinning blade of the axe he threw. It was glorious and satisfying for Now to save his son. Earth returned the favor and threw his axe at another man who was aiming his spear at Now. Earth hit this man directly in the middle of his chest. The axe sank deeply into the center of the man's torso, killing him instantly, dropping him to the ground. That moment made Now realize that if they didn't try to leave, they would be overwhelmed by the numbers of this group of people. There were too many of them to fight off at that point, but if they could get to the area of land where they'd have the high ground, they'd have a fighting chance. It was impossible to run away, so they needed help in the form of a distraction. The beasts by the water tried to hide, but were already caught. Now remembered a hand sign Earth taught him on the way, and gave it to them, signaling to go to the high ground. They had a close path to get there on one side, while Earth and Now had a farther path to take there on the other side of the river between the dry creek. This end was a trap sitting at that dry end that pocketed down into the land. The beasts were able to distract the people with spears. Seeing beasts run from the water to the high ground, the people knew this couldn't be good, as they imagined there was some idea to fight. As their attention shifted to chasing their neighbor beasts, the people left an opening for Now to run with Earth towards the other side of the high ground. It worked. Going up the steepest part of the hill, a couple spearsmen noticed Now running away with Earth and decided to go after them. Now was stopped by a flaming creature that was right at his feet. He almost burned himself, so he stopped to look and think about why this happened. Now thought of it as a sign and a blessing, then swung his sword like a paddle at this burning creature. They didn't have their axes anymore, so throwing their only weapons they were left with was not an option. This quick decision proved to be brilliant. One of the men who chased them up the hill was knocked right in the head with the burning creature's flames, killing him on impact. His head was struck by force, along with the heat, melting his head into mush. The man next to him was so frightened, he dropped his spear and ran away before the same happened to him. He would tell the rest of his people what happened, causing them to grow angry. The beasts were on one side of the high ground, while they waited for Earth and Now to reach the other side. The beasts were angry with these killers, knowing what Earth and Now knew not. The beasts knew there were people who didn't want beasts communicating with Earth because of Now. When the attackers saw them together and realized it could be Now, this started a frenzy. The beasts would find out who Now was as well, and some of them wanted to kill him too, knowing of the possible rewards. One of the men in the front of the pack threw up hand signs to the beasts. Earth knew this was no good, but Now did not understand. It was discovered who Now was. The people of the outside lands convinced their neighbor beasts to come join them to work out a deal. Earth knew they were working to conspire against them, but the beasts didn't know what was going to happen. They just saw the offer that was tempting them. The people dragged out a heap of flaming creatures gathered in a wire net. This delicacy had the beasts foaming at the mouth. The people knew that was all it was going to take to get the beasts to join them in pursuing Earth and Now. The beasts had no allegiance to them or anyone, so they could be easily persuaded into doing anything that benefited their own personal interests. They were led by their stomachs. The attackers knew their neighbors couldn't be trusted after all that happened there, so they planned this trick to kill the beasts along with Earth and Now. As soon as the beasts were occupied with their bait of a meal, the outside land people ran at them with spears, running them all through dead. Now took this opportunity to run with his son down the only path out, which led to the seaside town they were already headed to. The attackers might have been able to use the beasts long enough to team up against Earth and Now, but the attackers didn't want to risk getting any of their people killed, knowing the beasts were hostile against them, especially after murdering one of their leading hunters. "They want to kill you," Earth told Now as they ran down the river path that led to the sea. "Everyone wants to kill me," Now replied without even giving it a second thought. There was no doubt and no surprise. Now knew he was running from everyone. His life was expected to be taken eventually. Before the inevitable would happen, Now just wanted to do all he could to see his children and right all his wrongs as much as possible. Running out of the edge of the forest, Now didn't expect to make it out alive. He thought if he were to die there, at least he'd die in the place he'd always dreamed of, seeing the sand of the beaches, although he had a long way to go before he'd see the ocean. The river was long, and he was tired, only running on pure adrenaline. Now's feet hurt, and his sandals were falling apart. Besides this, he knew his son was getting hungry and very dehydrated. There was no water in sight that they could drink. The river was salt water. If they were going to live to see the beach town, they had to get the attackers off their backs to dig for drinking water. Now didn't know what to do. Now was used to going hungry and thirsty for long periods of time. This was to his advantage. He worried about his son though because he was used to a healthy farm schedule. He was strong. He was a strong young man. Now was strong but thin and not muscular like his son Earth. Now remembered a time when he was young. He thought about how he could have chosen a healthy lifestyle but stayed up all night every night drinking his life away. All Now's younger years were spent partaking in debauchery. Now thought of these things as they ran down the road alongside the river. The murderous attackers from the outside lands grew angrier and angrier as they tripped over themselves to catch up to Now. Earth was much faster than his father and had to keep stopping for him to catch up. Earth knew it was too late to escape. The people from the outside lands caught up with his father. Now stood by the river and smiled. He was thankful to have been able to have this time with his son, even if he were to die right then and there. Now knelt down and scooped up 2 handfuls of water, running it over his head to cool down, wishing he could drink it, but thankful to have no fear or worry. He was at peace with everything considering the circumstances. Now thought about what the attackers might do to his son, and the cool water changed his clarity. Now realized he could not have peace, knowing Earth might also be killed. Even if Now was at peace with dying, he could not rest knowing his son might also die. As soon as Now stood up from the river, a spear was thrown right at his face. Earth knew the moment he saw his father stop that he was about to see him die, but this did not happen. Now caught the godforsaken spear. The tip was right in his face and scratched his nose. Earth nearly fainted. The emotion Earth felt was so intense, he yelled in excitement that came from expelled fear, knowing he still had his father with him. Now became more savage than the beasts and the outside land people put together times 100. So did his son Earth after being so invigorated. Now charged right back at the man who threw the spear and stuck him right in his gut as other spears came right at him, but he did not care. Now cut those oncoming spears in 2 with his sword, one after the other as they came at him. Earth was so inspired by his dad's fearlessness, he let out a yell that frightened the attackers. They stopped and looked at Earth with their souls sucked out from their eyes. Earth ran at them while giving another yell and cut two spears in half as they were thrown at him. Earth threw his sword at a man that was in motion, about to throw his spear at him. Although it was his only weapon left on him, Earth didn't care and was not afraid. His sword sank into the man's chest, causing the blade to go straight through him all the way to the handle. Earth didn't bother to grab his sword right away. He instead picked up the man's spear and threw it at another man who was close to his father while he fought for his life. They were surrounded, but fought like hell to stay alive. One beast was still alive, with a burnt arm. He was so angry about the betrayal of his neighbors, he threw a flaming creature at one of them. This killed the man instantly, destroying his head by the fiery impact. With this angry beast joining the fight, it was enough to distract the remaining attackers. Now Earth ran away, leaving the rest behind. Along the way, the road by the river led Earth and now to a promising site. There was a small boat with two fishermen taking a rest. As soon as Now saw them, he knew what he was going to do. Now had lots of gold and silver pieces on him and offered these men some for their boat. They gladly took it without giving thought to who Now was. The rest of those outside landers fought the remaining beast for a good while before they were able to kill him. That beast was able to kill 3 of them. The last man killed by the angered beast was picked up like a piece of meat in his hands. The beast bit off half of the man's head as he himself was killed by spears. Now and Earth were happy to be away from those attackers and on that boat. The relief they felt was incomparable. "I can't believe we survived," Earth told his dad, still gasping for air. Now said, "My inner voice told me I wasn't going to die. I was ready to be killed until I thought about you meeting the same fate. I couldn't let you die by such wickedness." The boat was easy to move down the river as it drifted with the gentle current. All that needed to be done consisted of steering, which didn't require much effort or strength. This was an absolute blessing to Now, who was close to fainting. Earth brought the boat to a place by the river that looked like the best place to dig for water, which was about 10 miles downstream. Still, they couldn't see the ocean or any signs of the seaside towns, yet being away from the people from the outside lands was all the relief they needed. Earth wasn't mad at the beasts who turned so quickly against them. He knew they weren't anything else other than beasts. As for the people who were of the same tribe as Eth's family, being all the people Earth knew, this angered Earth deeply and bitterly. He didn't show his feelings about this to Now, since there was nothing good or productive that could come out of doing that. Earth figured his father felt the same way, just like all the betrayal Now experienced from his mother and the great city he fled. Earth did tell Now, "Some of those men knew my wife's family. They have common friends." Earth didn't have to say anything else for his father to understand. Now knew how his son felt. This failed world they lived in was filled with nothing but wicked people who betrayed each other for personal gain. Not one person did anything good. This kind of betrayal and indecency towards fellow neighbors was how the people lived since the beginning of creation there. They chose to go against what their Creator wanted for them, making themselves their own gods, worshipping in the most disgusting ways. Now's eyes started to grow heavy, and he could no longer keep them open. He was so exhausted, they had to stay shut. Now then slumped forward and slept. The water they found digging filled their stomachs and relaxed their nerves. Now never slept so well in all his life. Earth grabbed his father by the shoulders and gently laid him down on his side out of concern for comfort. Now's chin was resting on his chest before Earth did this. Earth was well rested and felt good enough to fish, so he spent that time gathering as much food as he could to keep them supplied for their travels. This was there was plenty of seaweed that was good to eat, especially when dried out. Earth wrapped sticks with as much seaweed as he could fit on the boat next to the fish he prepared to dry out as well, all for preservation. Then he found a dense stump and removed the thick exposed log, hollowing it out to fill with water. This was most pleasing for Now to see when he woke up about an hour later. When Now woke up, he looked around the little boat and smiled. "You've been busy while I slept," Now told his son. Earth gave a simple nod, then informed Now, telling him, "You've slept for an hour. Half that time I gathered these things we needed. We've been drifting down the river for a while now. I'm not sure how much longer till we see a town, or the sea itself." Now was very happy, and Earth could see it on his father's face. They enjoyed this time while they could, preparing for all sorts of possibilities in their quest. The best thing that was in their favor had to be the chances of being recognized. Now knew that the South Seaside towns were the best place to go to not be noticed. To the people there, he would seem like anybody else. Now never experienced that in his life, and always dreamed of it while traveling through the wilderness. So this was going to be the closest thing to paradise he'd ever have the chance to experience in his mind. Mosquitoes came to their little boat, making Now and Earth sick with a fever. They forgot about the stories of the seaside town to avoid. To get there, you had to cross an area of the river that was a breeding ground for disease carried by millions of mosquitoes. Their illness wasn't too serious, but made them burn up with a fever for that whole first night. In the morning, they saw they had drifted to the famous docks they'd heard so much about, where people made their homes on the seaside in boathouses. With their fevers sweated out, left with only itchy bumps, they were able to forgive the inconvenience.